My name is Faye. I'm the father of three estranged children, and I had a son that died last year at the age of 34. So I've experienced both kinds of losses. I'm really glad we're doing this because, in my experience, the holiday season has always been really the toughest for me. And I've spent some time thinking about what makes this so difficult. I think a part of what helps us as we are trying to navigate through this period of time is to understand what's happening to us and why is this so difficult. And I think part of it is because many of the things that we deal with, many of the feelings that we have year round are intensified in this period. So in some ways, these aren't brand new feelings that we have. They're just kind of magnified in this period of time in a challenging way. But there's also some things about this season and time of year that are unique, and I think combined with some of these other kinds of experiences that we have year round that make it particularly difficult. So I want to talk just a few minutes about what I think makes this so difficult for us. And Kelly, jump in from your perspective as a therapist as you have thoughts about this too.
Sure.
The first thing that I think about is loneliness. And it's intensified, in my experience, as the friends that we have are more focused and preoccupied with our unestranged children. Half of parents, the research shows that half of parents are in touch with their adult children every day, and 2/3 are in touch with their grandparents weekly or more. So during this time, that is just intensified. So the people that we typically connect with that are not estranged are even more occupied with their children and grandchildren in ways that we are not or cannot be. And I think that provides some more loneliness. At least that's how I experience, is people are just not as available. I think a second thing that happens is there's a intensification of feelings of defectiveness and stigma, because the media and even religious services tend to idealize family in this season. Michael J. Fox, that I have a lot of respect for, but one of the things he says is family is not an important thing, it's everything. Well, if family is everything and your children are everything and you don't have that relationship, then you have nothing. I mean, the implication is you have nothing, and that's just not true. But that's a message that I think we get fed pretty consistently from the media and from, even, like I say, even from religious services. Shame is also intensified because we feel that we're struggling and we're afraid we're kind of downers if we talk about our struggles when everyone else seems so joyful. And so there's a feeling of kind of shame that comes with that. And then there's all the ambiguity and confusion about what to do regarding sending cards and gifts. And for many of us, we revisit that every holiday season, in addition to every birthday and anniversary and all those kinds of things. But now we're hitting it again. And what do we do about our children and grandchildren in terms of sending cards, sending gifts, sending text messages, sending letters? And so there's that ambiguity and confusion about that I think takes a bit of a toll on us also. And then there are more opportunities in this season to engage in coping behaviors that are probably not the best, like eating too much, or drinking too much, or spending too much. And then we feel badly about ourselves. So many opportunities to do things that later we may think, oh, that probably wasn't the best for me. There's some other things related to the season in particular, though, that I think may kind of sneak up on us, or we may not realize what's happening. And the first is the days are simply getting shorter, and the amount of sunlight that we're receiving is decreased. So it's also colder, and we're spending more time indoors. And so with less light and spending more time inside and separated from people, maybe separated from the natural world, that has an impact on us as well. Another thing that tends to happen in these months is people tend to get sick in these early winter months with colds and influenza and other things. And whenever we get sick, it makes us more vulnerable emotionally and spiritually. It reminds us, unfortunately, in those times, even when we're, it's not anything real serious, we still realize we're not well and our children are not there for us in that time of need, and that makes it harder. And then a couple more things. December and January are months with the highest death rates of any other month in the year. And so we often lose friends and loved ones in these seasons, and they're reminders. I lost my sister. In fact, my kid sister, who was 2 years younger than me, it would have been about 7 years ago, I think, 5 or 6 years ago, Thanksgiving week. And my wife lost her sister on December the 7th. So, we have these losses also that take place or that we remember during the months which are more frequent during December and January. And finally, there's a kind of natural focus on children in this season that stirs up memories of our children when they were younger and the ways we celebrated holidays with them. And so you put all of this together, and the holidays can be a kind of perfect storm where these and other challenges kind of converge and amplify one another. And so all of that together is part of what's happening to us that can be challenging. Now, there's some good parts about this season, and I'll talk about those in a minute. But Kelly, let me pause here and say, do you have anything to add to this list in terms of what you see making it difficult for estranged parents when you are working with them?
Well, it's all over the place, and it's interesting because we have in my office building, we have a collection of toys for Christmas for children who are in shelters, and even that elicits comments, and people talk about that. But the thing that you said that I really wanted to just really back up is seasonal affective disorder is real, and so this change of seasons has a big impact for some people with that added weight of seasonal affective disorder. So not to dismiss that as having an impact that, frankly, if we had our children around, would somewhat be alleviated.
Right. And that's the kind of thing with the reduced sunlight, we may not realize the kind of impact that's having on us.
Yes.
Unfortunately, that can be remedied, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. Okay, Kelly, anything else?
No, thank you.
Okay. So I've been speaking about the challenges of the season, and I want to talk about the other side of it, that this season that contains the darkening days of winter has been one of the most spiritually significant to people down through the ages. It was a time to the ancients that when they felt like the sun was dying and the world might be coming to an end. And instead, there was always a fresh beginning as the days began to lengthen again. And this season of less light, spending more time inside, kind of encourages a kind of introspection, going inward. What I like to think of as a thin space. Spiritually, the space between heaven and earth becomes thin. in the minds of the ancients going down through the centuries up to now. And spiritual companions come close to us. There's a reason that so many angels are in the original Christmas story. And if we're willing to open ourselves to those very real, unseen presences, it can be a time of really going deeper. And so I want to talk just a little bit from a spiritual standpoint about this season. Now, I come from a Christian standpoint, and I would encourage whatever faith or spiritual practice that is important to you to make use of it. But I'm coming from that particular tradition, and I'll just speak from that without trying to foist that upon anyone in particular. But I think it's a time to go deeper. And I heard that when quarterback Joe Montana was asked his philosophy of life, he said, "Go deep." And if we're going to go deeper than a childhood understanding of these days, then we can experience some of the most significant moments of our lives. And I said a few minutes ago that these days, these holidays, tend to be the most difficult ones of the year, but they are also the time when, even though they're painful, they're also the days I feel closest to God. I feel like I write better, I love deeper, I'm generally more creative than any other time of the year. So I think there is spiritual opportunity for all of us, which is what the season really is about. So take the verse, the basic verse in Luke, and Mary gave birth to her firstborn son and wrapped him in swaddling cloths and laid him in a manger. Sometimes I think we've heard that so much from the standpoint of children or Christmas pageants. We haven't really looked at the adult version of that, because I think when we do, every parent can remember the day of their child's birth or adoption. It may not have been the easiest of days, but it was fresh with expectation. The slate was clean. No mistakes had been made yet. No missteps. Nothing to regret or feel guilty about. And when we remember those days, we each have a personal nativity scene in our minds, I think. And in that personal nativity scene, when our child first came into the world or into our lives, there were likely no mangers or stables or straw. Nonetheless, the Christmas story takes us back not only to the birth of Jesus, but to the births of our children as well. And in the early years that followed, our young children looked up to us as gods, and they were eager to please, and they were longing to be with us. And there's a natural tendency, I think, for us in these days to become nostalgic, to feel a kind of sentimental longing, wistful affection for that past, a period or place with happy personal associations. And that's, there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, that's good and healthy. I've done some research on nostalgia and just remembering things in the past that we remember with affection. And there's a place for that, and it can be healthy. Just like there's a place for the Christmas celebration of Jesus's birth every year. Our poinsettia hearts open in ways that almost seem magical. However, we have to balance this with a larger view. And the sentimentality of Christmas must eventually give way to the reality that our adult children now have their own ideas about things that may be quite different from ours and quite different from the way they were years ago. In fact, if you look at the life of Jesus, it only took him 12 years to cause his parents considerable anxiety when he disappeared on a family trip, resulting in a significant dressing down by his mother. His parents were bewildered, and she says, "Son, why have you done this to us? Your father and I have been frantic, bewildered. So why have you done this to us? And your father and I have been frantic." And these are the kinds of things that every parent has found themselves saying as their children get older, and estranged parents more painfully than others, perhaps. So parenting adults is no easy job, even if your child is Jesus. They are no longer the cute, large-eyed, round-faced infants cooing up at you. They are adults and they have their own identities and opinions and motivations and relationships, and they have their own destiny. And like you, they are also beset with their own flaws and fickleness. And so I think about this nostalgia, and what I try to do is say there's a time for that. There's a time to engage in those remembrances of my children, when they were born, past Christmases, with their soft touches and their special smells and their fleeting purity. And I enjoy those moments of reflection, and I breathe them deeply into my soul. However, I have to be careful that I'm not crippled by the temptation to make those remembrances either seeds of bitterness or the North Star of my future. Our future is full of potential and possibilities, but we risk sacrificing it if we're constantly longing for an idealized past that we were meant to celebrate and then move forward. I like this saying: you only get to be a hero in this world with your children for a few brief years, and then they grow up and you must leave the stage and sit in the seat with the mortals. So that kind of reflection spiritually from the text, kind of an adult thinking about the text of Christmas and the value of nostalgia, but also the importance of being realistic and allowing our children to grow up and realize they're not, while we celebrate those years, they are adults now, and we need to let them find their own path and their own destiny. So that's kind of the reflection that I have from a spiritual standpoint. And again, whatever tradition you come from, I would encourage you to think about it, the adult version of that tradition.
Hey, you just covered your face up.
Oh, whoops.
There
Okay.
you go.
So Kelly, anything to add to that before I move on to some other things in terms of what I found to be helpful?
Oh gosh. No, I guess everything I'm thinking about putting out there, I'm getting ready to say when it's my turn. So I'm going to let you just go on
Okay.
with that.
All right. So let me just talk about the things I found helpful in terms of my own process. And while I have said that this has been the most difficult time of the year for me, every year gets better. And I would say this year, and it's been, I've been dealing with this for a couple of decades now. So we always have to be patient with ourselves. We're all in different places. But I feel a degree of recovery without losing the love for my children that I have not felt previously. And I do find myself feeling better each year. So here are the things that I found are important. First, avoid passivity. Don't let the holidays be something that happens to you. Prepare yourself, set some appropriate expectations, take steps to make this a better experience. What's your vision for this time of year? Set some realistic goals in terms of what you're going to do in moving through it, and don't just, again, become passive. Be an active participant in this story of the holidays. Secondly, become an expert on your own life. My therapist said to me once, Faye, you are the expert on your own life. And what I mean by that is, think about what has helped you in the past. And whatever has helped you in the past, do it again, or even do more of it.
If it's healthy.
That's healthy. Yeah. That's my therapist friend reminding me. That's important. That's an important word to add. Here's one that's real personal that I probably wouldn't think of if I hadn't gone through it myself. Don't try going off your antidepressant during the holidays. If you plan to reduce or eliminate medication, do it under a doctor's supervision. But if it's an antidepressant, you may want to think about doing it after the holidays. I did it once during the holidays, and that was really difficult. So be cautious about that. Fourth, illness makes the holidays harder. So try to stay healthy. Try to avoid getting sick. Get appropriate immunizations. Wash your hands. You've heard all of these things. Avoid people who are ill. Wear a mask in some settings. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, or mouth. Just be vigilant as you can be about staying healthy by taking these pretty simple and appropriate steps. Get enough sunlight. Going back to the original, this is something we can take steps to deal with, right? We're getting less sunlight with every day, but sunlight cues special areas in the retina, which triggers the release of serotonin in the brain. Serotonin is a natural antidepressant. Even 10 to 15 minutes of sun exposure each day can make a difference. So make sure you're getting enough sunlight. If you're going to get more than 10 or 15 minutes, put on sunblock, because many of us are older and we have risk, like I do, of skin cancer. But get enough sunlight. Get exercise. Do a winter hike. Walk in holiday decorated malls. Again, small amounts of exercise, just 20 minutes a day. You don't have to run a marathon. You don't have to be a jogger. Just 20 minutes of walking can make a difference in your mood. Attend an extra peak drop-in meeting or meetings. One of the things that Kelly and I have really worked hard to do is provide additional opportunities for estranged parents in this holiday season. And that includes morning meetings on Thanksgiving morning at 8 o'clock. There's a group that's going to be meeting, and then every day beginning December the 1st through January 6th at 8 o'clock for 45 minutes. There's a group that's meeting. We additionally have 3 drop-in groups for people on Monday at 4, 6, and 8. This is all on the website. So don't be afraid to attend an extra meeting if you need it, and especially if you need it on the holiday itself, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's Day. Just show up and be a part of that process. There are lots of people. You are not alone, which is the theme that Kelly's given to this meeting. And you aren't alone. And these are important. All the people that are on this meeting to remind us we are not alone. Focus your thinking on positive thoughts. Here's something that I read that just blew me away. Emotions, like sadness, only last a minute and a half. They dissipate after 90 seconds. After 90 seconds, we must re-trigger that emotion by a thought or something that's happened to us. So if we are feeling sad for an hour, it's because we have re-triggered that emotion 40 times by choosing to focus on a particular thought. So when we choose a different set of thoughts, then we potentially have a different set of emotions. So if we find ourselves in an emotion that's persisting, it is often because we have a thought that we keep going back to over and over again that's re-triggering that emotion. Otherwise, it would be gone in 90 seconds. And one way of doing that is by focusing on your daily spiritual practice of some kind, whatever that might be. One of the reasons that I wrote the Peak Advent Christmas Epiphany book, which is daily readings, is just for this purpose. It's for people to have something that they can read on a daily basis that can help kind of bring their thoughts back to something positive. Well, whether you use that or journal or write or sing, attend religious services of some kind, these are all ways of getting your thought processes focused positively. And that takes some work. It's almost like an inner muscle that we have to learn to exercise. Be prepared to, and I think Kelly gave me this, she could talk more about it, reframe in real time. And for me, what that means is when I have some experience of the media that's uplifting, I want to focus on that. When media experiences are unrealistic fantasies, I want to say that. I'm like, that's not real. That's a fantasy. And instead of critiquing myself, when I see a movie like that, which I tend to do, I critique the movie instead. Um, Engage in service to others, including reaching out to your peak community, uh, other parents, other estranged parents. You know, if you can reach out to them on holidays, they will appreciate it, and I think it's part of our healing process too. As I mentioned in the reflection, stay in reality. It's okay to spend time remembering, but also remember your kids are adults, and you can't form a future out of the past. Do a deep dive into the reality of the Christmas story. Start thinking about it as an adult and what that story was like for the adults in that experience. For example, Mary and Joseph, we have no record of family being around them. They are not comforted by family in the record of the gospel. They are comforted by total strangers. And how do we allow that to happen in our lives? This is a good time to celebrate the accomplishments of the past year, let go of disappointments, including mistakes. Keep things in perspective. Holidays don't last forever. Things will get better. And there have been holidays in my past years, and that's just what I held on to. This isn't going to last forever. It's going to get better. Be clear about communication and gift giving. Kelly may talk some more about that. This is important. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but a large percentage, I've done a lot of suicide prevention work. I think up to a third of estranged parents at some point have thought about suicide as a result of their estrangement. That happens to the best of us. Don't condemn yourself. It's part of the human experience. But if you find yourself making plans or on the verge of taking action, get help and call a helpline. The suicide hotline is 988. 988. So again, don't condemn yourself. You're not sick. You're not sinful. You're just going through a hard time. And just make sure you get help before you do something, take any kind of action. Keep busy with meaningful activity. And then finally, I find this helpful. Cradle your adult children near your heart. Send blessings to them from the heart. My heart is stronger than my mind. If I try to carry them in my mind, I get into all kinds of conversations and ruminations and, what has been said or what I'd like to say. My mind is not strong enough to carry it, but my heart is. And so when I carry my children in my heart and I send out prayers or blessings from the heart without going to ruminations of the mind, I find that helpful as well. So Kelly, those are the kinds of things I've found to be.
Yeah, the one thing that I would want to emphasize, Faye, when you started your list and you were talking about some of the health impacts, is that estranged parents suffer more frequent and intense physical ailments than parents who are not estranged. And stress weakens your immune system. And this is a baseline stress that once it comes in, it stays and it lingers and it does its job on your nervous system. And if your body's busy keeping your nervous system in check, it can lose some of its effectiveness in your immunity. And so those steps might sound like everyday steps that we've heard, some of them for 2 years now because of COVID, but they are really, really important steps. People who have chronic illness, long-term chronic illness, will find that it becomes exacerbated after there's been an estrangement. And not just in the short term. You get skin rashes, and if you have diabetes or lupus or any sort of chronic fatigue syndrome or chronic Lyme disease, it gets worse. So that I can't say enough about recognizing and associating that physical health is impacted by estrangement.
And so that becomes an encouragement for, self-care. Take serious your own, your own well-being and what you need to do to be okay is really important.
Yeah. So am I stepping on your toes, Faye, or were you done?
Oh, I think I'm done for now.
Okay, good. Alrighty, so I'm gonna hop in here and make sure that I can, oops, I think I did that wrong. Get back to where I can see people again. There we go. Okay. So the 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 story that Faye was telling you about the nativity is really an important piece to for me to share with you this next part, because it leads into what I call a co-created narrative. And I want to follow up on the idea of nostalgia with the concept of what is called a co-created narrative. For parents that are estranged from their adult children, there is no co-created narrative. 66% of adult children who have estranged their parents will tell us, yes, I have told my parents why I have made this choice. And 66% of parents will tell us, no, they don't know why their child did that. There is no co-created narrative. And I want to talk a little bit about that as a means of helping you understand how you got to where you are at, but also as a way of understanding perhaps a step that you can take on your own without even having your children around that will help you should you have that opportunity to reconcile. So let me first just define co-created narrative. So a co-created narrative is when two or more people are telling their experience of a shared event in a way that allows room for both stories to be valid. Having multiple perspectives on the same event will allow each person to recognize the other person's point of view as valid, even if it doesn't match your own. So I'm going to do a screen share for a minute here and talk to you a little bit about a co-created narrative, and then I'll come back to our group. So get this to do what I wanted to, screen share. All right, so hopefully, okay, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, so this is two little girls quite clearly at Christmas. Big sister, I'm dressed just like my sister. Grumpy little face. And boy, that little sister next to her is just proud as punch. I'm dressed just like my sister. Those two have very different perspectives on this day and this moment. And there's a third person who's not in this picture, who has yet another story. And that would be the person who selected those dresses. So if we think about this for a few minutes, I'm going to stop sharing now, just so, all right. So if we think about this just for a few minutes, oops, now I've got to get myself where I was. That third person's going to have a different story. So there's three different stories going on here. Now, we can each make up in our head what each person's story is. So let's say big sister grows up and she's now 22 years old, and she is mad as a wet hen at her parent. And what she is saying is, you never let me have my own identity. You dressed us alike and you chose my clothes and you made me wear what you liked. And that's their story. And the little girl that's now 20 is like, what's wrong with sis? I don't get what the problem is. Her story is I just loved looking up to my big sister, and now I'm embarrassed. I'm hurt. I can't understand why she's doing this to our parents. And the parents, probably the people who picked out the outfits, are like, we were just enjoying having two beautiful little girls who looked beautiful in this dress and just wanted to reinforce the idea of sisterhood. Whose story is right? They all have their own story, but they have never sat down, gotten together, and talked about what was going on here and their perspectives and where they were coming from so that they could understand each other and be okay to say, boy, mom, I didn't take it that way. And for mom to be able to say, and I would have never, ever wanted you to take it the way you did. I am so sorry. Not what I wanted. So, the stories will be very different. And so I sort of talked about, Faye was talking about the nativity. So I see a lot of female faces on the screen, and I would say that the experience of childbirth is different for mom than dad, but dads too have their experience of it. And I think as a mom, as I reflect back on that nativity scene, I'm finding it really hard to picture. I mean, this is somebody else's narrative. This isn't Mary's narrative. If I could zoom back and talk to Mary, Mary would be saying to me, are you kidding me? I had to lean on some piece of wood while they were cleaning out and mucking out a stall for me so that we could throw down some hay. And I had strangers coming in and out to feed the other animals. And what is it with this song? The cattle are lowing, the poor baby waits. But he doesn't make any sound. This is really a narrative that I'm sure everybody has their own story about. The guy that's got to go in and take care of the animals probably had a few unkind words to say about the boss. You got to go in there. She's having a baby. I don't want to go in there. So everyone's got their story. Everyone's got their point of view. And until we share that, until we have the opportunity to talk with each other and say, this is what was on my mind. I never intended this or that. So the difficulty with this is that people get stuck in their own version of the story. And for whatever reason, they cannot let it go. Whether they feel like they have to be right. It's just becomes an intractable story. So this co-created narrative is a huge missing factor in any relationship that's estranged.
I think also, Kelly, it's that we don't have maybe an opportunity to sit down and talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
It requires a certain disposition to be willing to listen
Mm-hmm.
to the story of another, and to recognize it has validity, even though we may not, have the same emotions about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of it's removing the vilification. The villain of the story. There has to be a villain.
Yeah.
And just saying a willingness to hear. And I think as an estranged parent, as I've had conversations with many estranged parents, there is this just inability that parents feel, even when they're saying they're sorry, to find that their children are able to hear that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not only the getting together and talking, is finding yourself with people that will hear what you have to say, and yeah, and accept that as a valid story on your part.
Yeah, that's so true. What pops up for most humans, which so far as I can see on the screen, most of us are that, is defensiveness.
Mhm.
We want to defend our position. And that comes from the very, even more basic human need of being seen, understood. And so we call it defensiveness, but what we're actually doing is begging the other person, whether it's our partner or our colleague or whatever, please understand me. I'm not necessarily asking people to agree, although for some people, their logic is, if you really understood me, you would agree with me.
Mhm.
And that's really difficult. But if we could switch that way of thinking to, if you really understood me, we could get this story together and just accept what I have to say. And that very basic human need to be heard is really very deeply seated in us because it makes us feel visible to the most important people in our life. So we get stuck in that version, and some people um can't can't hold that we could both have two valid points of view given who we were at the time doing the best we could as parents. And so it becomes, it has to be right and wrong. And that becomes very difficult then for people to hear each other. And
Right.
some people can't admit to changing their point of view because it feels emotionally unsafe. And I wanted to say a few words about this emotionally unsafe. We hear it a lot. Um, the new language around it that's getting thrown around is toxic. You're a toxic parent or a toxic boss or a toxic sibling. And really, our work in all of our relationships is to be sure that we are safe for that person, which means, can we hear somebody admit something to us and just hold that instead of coming back with something like, that, see what I mean? You're doing it now, or I told you that years ago. Why are you just getting it? Or some other remark. And parents tell me frequently that when they have taken that moment to make themselves vulnerable, to say, you're right, that was a mistake. I probably should have done it differently. And I really wish I could. That in that moment of vulnerability, what we need to hear back is, thanks. I really appreciate that you can understand that maybe I saw it differently than you. Instead,
Mhm.
you get back nasty comments and hurtful remarks, and it's a little too late now, and all sorts of comments that are very painful. And so then you don't feel safe enough to go forward again. And that's some hard work to be able to overcome that and say, I'm gonna listen and hear that, and I'm gonna try to do this differently anyway.
And Kelly, I think uh, there's a meta kind of a meta narrative out there, um, as I see it as an estranged parent, that when I read about estrangement in the media, whether it's a 60 Minutes, I think it's been covered by 60 Minutes, New York Times, or Picket, it's often the same narrative, which is you have an adult child, you have parents who are, using your phrase, toxic, abusive, neglectful, addicted, mentally ill, and that this is the source of the estrangement. And I think and so that makes me want to be, to some extent, uh, an advocate for parents. Not that parents are perfect at all, but when this narrative out there keeps being played over and over and over again, then I want to raise my voice and say, sure, we're parents and we're fallible, but so are children. They're
Yeah.
human beings too, and they're fallible. And so this is what I think is so refreshing about what you're saying about a co-created narrative, in that it puts the responsibility on all of us, both parents and children, if there's going to be movement forward. But it also helps us as estranged parents understand why we can only go so far, because that co-created narrative has to be, they have to be willing to participate in that. And that's the source of so much frustration, I think, when we're trying to bridge that gap.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't, because there's a story that's being held that we do not have power we can listen to it, but we can't, our story cannot be heard often.
Right. Right. And that goes, and that it's really difficult because the two major parts of any conversation are what we call intent and interpretation. And I can have all the best intentions in the world, and if you interpret me through the lens of being mean or hateful or toxic, then that's how it's been interpreted, and I have no control over that unless we have a conversation around a co-created narrative and you can hear my apology. So that intent versus interpretation is at the root of all of this for us. And so, I want to end here so shortly, so that we can have time for the questions. But what I have written that I wanted to say, and Faye, you basically said it in just a different way, was that today's estrangement does not invalidate past memories. They are what they are. You enjoyed them and you love them. And those two little girls in that picture, whoever dressed those children like that loved that Christmas, and it was just magic for them, and that's okay. That doesn't invalidate. That doesn't become invalid. And the last thing is, I was just wanted to put this out there, is when does remembering become obsessing? Because it's okay to have these memories. It's okay to look back nostalgically. And the question about when does remembering become obsessing? And my answer to that is if it's ruining relationships. And by that, I mean, if you have other relationships in your life that are healthy, partners, good friends, colleagues, whatever that might be, the remembering becomes obsessing when it's ruining relationships, and really time to think about, I need another outlet. I need somebody who's not going to have a ruined relationship because I need to share this. And again, that's a piece of our groups that really works well, is because you have a bunch of people who all understand what's going on because they've been there. So I am going to open the chat box so I can see what we have for questions, and close this one so it's little. Okay. So let me see. First question I have in here from Faye, and I don't know if you can see the chat box too, but we'll start there at the top and we'll move down, and Faye and I can answer in either way. So this one is, thank you so much for doing this. I'd love to know how I can support my husband as a stepmom in his sadness over being estranged from his son and two grandkids for many years now. It is so hard to see him suffer so much, especially on birthdays and holidays. And boy, that is supporting our partner, whether you're the stepmom or the mom or the partner, is really difficult. And being there to hear them as many times as they need to tell you what's going on, and not offering solutions unless you're asked for ideas, because many times somebody just wants to be heard. Those are two very supportive ways. um, helping them with the lists of things that Faye and I have put out about staying healthy and staying focused on something else. And Faye, I'm going to let you jump in because you have experience with this.
Right. So I think, it's like anytime we have a family member that's struggling with something, the first thing that we have to do is make sure that we are tending to ourselves, because our reactions to things can sometimes be more problematic than the thing itself. And so making sure that you're doing what you need to do to be okay in terms of that list of things or other things is extremely important, because when you are trying to care for a family member, that requires something of you. And so making sure that you're taking care of yourself in all the ways that we've talked about is really really important, I think.
Yeah.
So I think listening, not trying to fix it, um, uh, not offering advice on what the person needs to do to fix it, because as we all know, this is not something that's easily repaired. But being present to them, listening to them, letting them talk about how they are thinking and feeling. I mean, I think that's extremely valuable, even if there's nothing you can do to change the situation for them.
Mm. Yeah, that's true. And and I think that's the thing that is the most difficult in that position, because you feel helpless.
Well, you
And
do
help.
helpless, and I mean, so, and there may be also some, to be quite honest, there can be some resentment. It's like we're having a holiday ruined. Now I'm going to exaggerate a little bit, but we're having a holiday that's being impacted by, this estrangement, and I can feel like, I can start to feel like, oh, it's resentful that that's happening, and that's why I think making sure that we take care of ourselves and deal with our own feelings and getting what we need, it is important, so that our our reactions to that, whether that's resentment or jealousy or something else, doesn't get in the way of our health or the relationship. So I think getting the resources that we need for ourselves and dealing with our feelings about how we're being impacted by this estrangement, even though it may be happening to our partner, is important.
Mm, yes, yes. Um, okay, so I have another question here. I'm wondering if you or Faye have ever seen a successful co-creation of a narrative between estranged parents and an adult child. It seems impossible. I have heard the success rate is the same as surviving pancreatic cancer. Well, from my perspective, as a therapist, I can say that I have seen that. It is very difficult because there's so much to overcome. And the most success I've seen is between people who want to when both parties really do want to reconcile and feel like there's just a bump in the road that they can't manage. I would say it's probably a little bit higher than pancreatic cancer. I think pancreatic cancer is like 1 or 2% of the people who contract it actually survive it. So I would have to say, from my experience, but let me put a caveat on that. The people who don't want to work on their relationships as a pair don't come to see me. So I don't have that opportunity. It's when people are saying, yes, we're both willing, we both want to work on it, we both want to sit there and have this coached conversation, is when I see the success. And Faye, if you have anything that you've witnessed on your end.
Actually, I had that with my son. I reconnected, he reconnected with me, and we had a couple of months of, I think, the kinds of conversations where we came to understand each other. And, he got to know who I was as a father, and I got to know who he was as my son. And it was wonderful, but it really required kind of coming to the, kind of hitting bottom, if you will, for that to happen. And so even though I lost him, the there was no doubt at the end of the day that there was nothing left unsaid. He knew I loved him, and I knew that he loved me, and that we had a shared understanding, forgiveness going both ways. And so, yes, I've experienced that. I mean, it was combined with the sense of loss of losing him, which of course was quite sad. But I wouldn't trade those 2 months of reconnecting for anything. I also know that there's nothing I could have done to make that happen. And it had to happen at its own time and in its own way. So I do think it can happen. I also think we have to be ready for it. And we have to be ready to do the work of listening and speaking, the work of what Kelly's describing. And I think the best way that we can be prepared for that is to do the kinds of things we talk about in Peak in terms of all the parts of a recovery process.
If you do much reading on this situation, you will probably come across the description of the reconciliation estrangement dance. And I tend to not agree with the way that's named. So what they call the reconciliation estrangement dance is a pattern that most families go through, where there's a period of distance, maybe emotional distance. They're just maybe even in the same household, but they're really distancing. And then things seem good again. And then the next time it's longer, it's more harsh, and then it's good again. And then eventually there's a moving out or a literal cutting off because they can financially move out and move away, or they have other influences in their life doing that. And I don't like to use the word reconciliation estrangement dance, because that's not a true reconciliation. That's a reunification estrangement dance. Reconciliation is when you can begin to work on the co-created narrative and have good conversation. And it's not easy conversation, and sometimes you have to actually make your boundaries, and this is where you can start to get some of your power back and to balance, not so that you can be more powerful than them, but to get an equal balance, because the conversation can be difficult, and you might only be able to tolerate 15 or 20 minutes. And it's okay to say, I'm struggling right here. I'm really so happy that this is happening, but I think I'm at my limit right now. Can we talk again in 3 days or 5 days, or what you need? And be able to express your gratitude for the work that's happening, but you also need to be able to make that space for yourself. So I tend to call it more the reunification estrangement dance instead of reconciliation. Faye and I have both written books about this, and from different perspectives. And so there's some information in my book about that dance and about the stages of estrangement. So that book is Relation Snip, if you're looking for it. So the next question.
I think
Okay.
just to add to what you said, Kelly, I think
Sure.
that during the holidays, how this applies during the holidays, at least for me, is the longing to reconnect is intensified. Um, and I mean, what a wonderful story it would be, right? If the Christmas season becomes the point at which the things we're talking about are
Mm,
realized. And I think sometimes there's a temptation for us to try and press something to happen that it may not be time for.
yeah.
And we may be tempted to violate boundaries
Hmm.
that have been set and we need to honor um, because we're impatient. Uh, and the holiday season with all of it, there's a kind of opening of the heart um, that is a part of that. And I think we have to um, kind of remind ourselves to be patient and not to require that this season be the time when when it gets fixed the way we would like it to, but to find other meanings in the season
Hmm.
for our spiritual and emotional journey
Hmm.
and our own healing that
Yeah.
that may not include reconciliation in the season.
Yeah. And my perspective, and I'm going to say more about it later because I can see the questions that are coming up here about around gifts and that. But my perspective is just given the history with me in my practice is that the holiday is the worst time to try it.
Yeah.
It's the worst time. And I'll explain more about that as we go down through the questions here. All right, next question is all three of my children live far away, and the chances of us ever seeing us again doesn't seem like something that will happen. Therapy would help possibly, but how and when? This is where my faith fails. And when I send gifts, they go unacknowledged or worse, returned to me and refused. Um, the therapy, so right now in the United States, let me just say this right up front that we cannot practice outside of our state. And it's very hard to find a therapist who understands estrangement and doesn't blame the parent for the whole thing or make the parent totally responsible for fixing it. So it's going to be hard to find a therapist to work with. But if you can find a therapist that practices what we call Bowen family systems theory, the only psychological theory out there for working with families that actually addresses estrangement. So if they're trained in Bowen family systems therapy, there's a good chance you'll find someone who gets it. And the reason that I say that is now with the huge upsurge in video work that we do in therapy since COVID has really opened doors for people who are distant. And there are three of us right now who are working with families on video. And one of the things that we've learned is that if the person that has engaged us is in New York State, the other person doesn't have to be. So one of our families is working with a child who's in Texas and with someone in New York State, and that is working well. So it can happen that way if it's at all available to you. Um, and the gifts, um, there's there's another question on here, at least one other question about gifts. So I'm going to find that one and combine because there's a lot of similarity there. So this one question here, Faye, I'll defer to you. Is the list that you read talked about the things that were good to do, good and healthy? Is that on the website?
Yes.
Yes.
So if you go to the homepage of the website, in fact, yeah, if you go to the homepage of the website and it talks about holiday offerings, click on that. And then at the top of that page, It says for more suggestions, click here, and it's a PDF that can be downloaded.
Okay, good, good. Okay, so this next question is gifts. So I'll try to bundle questions around that here. What do you suggest about sending texts, written letters, cards, and gifts, etc.? I want my son, and grandsons to know I will always love him no matter where he is. And lastly, how to handle a lack of response. Yeah, sadly, that is not a surprise. So the first thing that I can say about this, and from the therapeutic side of this, and Faye, you may see it from experiential as well, is first is respect their boundaries. If they have said to you, I do not want to hear from you, the most painful words we can hear, because they'll throw in text, email, gifts, telephone calls. They don't want any of it. If they have put that boundary up, you are giving them fodder for the next argument if you break that boundary. However, the way that I suggest people handle that is by, when that happens, is to be able to be very clear that the ball is in their court. I'm sorry that you feel that way. This is very difficult, but I understand that this is how you want it right now. And so we will wait to hear from you for the next move. There have been a couple of exceptions that I have made in my office after talking to parents having to do with deaths in the family and that sort of thing. But for the most part, honoring their boundary is really the most important thing that you can do. Or
Yeah.
you
Would add, Kelly, is when you take that step, what happens to you when you get a negative response? And when Kelly was talking earlier about physical illness, I think I know of parents who when they get a response back that's harsh, it has such an impact on them. It affects them emotionally, it affects them physically. And I think that's also a consideration.
Mhm.
You need to know yourself well enough to know if a response to an outreach and the harshness of that is such that it makes you, if it impacts you so negatively that it really interferes with your recovery process, then I'm going to be an advocate for you and for your well-being. And I'm going to say, let that be a consideration in what you do. And I guess I depart a little bit from what may be the common wisdom, which is parents should be able to take anything.
Mm.
And I don't believe that.
No.
I think parents are human beings and they have rights. And one of those rights is to be able to be healthy and well. And if they need to protect themselves from the comments or responses of others, that's a legitimate thing for them to do without feeling guilty or like they have failed. So that's the other piece I would think I would add to it, Kelly.
Mm-hmm. And I would totally agree. You do have to take care of yourself and do what is best for you. In the long game, everybody wants reconciliation. We know that that's not something that happens 100% of the time. It happens much less frequently than that. And in the end, your health, your mental health, your physical well-being is important, so that you can move through life and get to a place where you can recognize that you have purpose and worth, and none of that balances on someone else's opinion of your parenting. It just doesn't. Okay. Mine is exactly the same as the last question. My daughter is at her boyfriend's for Thanksgiving just to say I love you through text, but I get accused of being manipulative. My motivations are questioned, and I'm scared of no response, the endless rejection. So true. I'm so tired of saying sorry for everything and now being rejected and treated with hostility for nearly a decade. I can't hand the cruelty and rejection. I am so tired. And that is exhausting work. It is exhausting. And one of the reasons that you might set boundaries, one of the reasons that you might set boundaries, um, accused of being manipulative and your motivations are questioned, that's, assuming what someone else's motivations are is very, very difficult to combat because they can say, well, this is what you mean when you say that, and it's not what you mean. And you're not going to be able to convince them otherwise. So I don't know from this question if this daughter has asked for no communication or sometimes is in communication. And I think that's more ambiguous for you as parents to get that on again, off again. I'll text you when I want to, but you can't text me when you want to, sort of thing. Or you're being manipulative. And that's very difficult because when do you get to talk? When do you get to ask questions? When do you get to say anything? And basically, you're being told never, never. I control this. And so
Well, you're also being, you're also being gaslighted.
that's true.
And again, I know as parents, and I know for myself for certain, my um, my shortcomings. So it's not that we live in denial of those, but I also know it's not in anyone's interest for us to end up emotionally kind of crippled by this experience or ill or even suffer an early death. So I'm going to be an advocate for folks to say, if you send a message and not hearing, and then from that point on, you are on edge for a month or 2 months because you haven't heard anything. And that's affecting you negatively in significant ways, emotionally, relationally, physically, then I would say you have every right to protect yourself and not keep putting yourself in that position. And that doesn't make you a bad parent. It doesn't make you a bad person or unloving. It makes you a person who is being a good steward of their own life because the world needs you. We all need you. And we need you to be as healthy and strong as you can be. And you deserve to be.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I don't know if it's on our website yet. It is our goal to have it up there. Faye might know better than I do. There is a estranged parents bill of rights, I guess. Is that what it's called exactly? Faye?
Yes.
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 And you may find that helpful if you go to the website and get the estranged parents rights and just read that over and see how that fits in for you guys. So the next one is, and we're running on 8:20, so we'll go as quickly as we can now. I've tried listening to my children and their narrative, trying to validate their perspective and offering an apology. The pain of them not hearing the apology and not recognizing my vulnerability is excruciating. I see the validity of continuing, but this is not pain that I want to continue to experience. What are some strategies you have to offer? Yeah, this makes perfect sense. You've been as vulnerable as you dare to be, and they're on the other side where they can't see another story, they can't hear your point of view, and it is continually painful. And this is where we would say again to be caring for yourself. One of the things neither Faye nor I mentioned in caring for yourself is taking care of physical body, massage, run, those are such ways that releases that negative energy, that pent up energy. It's so helpful for you to do that. Yoga, those things are, it might sound cliche, but they do the trick. They just do the trick, and they help with all of that. So that's some of the strategies about taking care of yourself with that. And again, um, I actually had not planned on saying anything about my book tonight, but this question, there's the things I've written about in the book, about moving forward and taking care of yourself in this recovery phase while you hope. All right, there. One of you is holding it up in the window, relation step. Apparently, one of you is reading it. Thank you, Barbara Foster. Amy Booth, she's reading it. Thank you, Amy. That's wonderful. So if you get a chance to read the book I've written, Faye's book has strategies in it as well. Peak, a resource for recovery, we're all about recovery. We're all about recovery. That's what our focus is, because quite frankly, we don't find it to be fair to talk a lot about reconciliation. What, first of all, it's not frequent. And secondly, working through the recovery process, excuse me. I'm a therapist. I don't talk this much all day, and now I'm stressed, my throat. So working through it, the recovery process prepares you to be better equipped in the reconciliation process. So for some folks, the thought of reaching out to other supports to provide companionship, especially during family-oriented holidays, may well be giving up on or displacing or being unfaithful to our children. Would you reinforce disentangling these two things? I got to read that again. For some folks, the thought of reaching out to other supports to provide companionship, especially during family holidays, may well be giving up on or displacing, it might feel like you're giving up or displacing and being unfaithful to our children. Would we reinforce disentangling these two things? Yes. You need to do what you need to do to be healthy, and if somebody interprets it's the two-edged sword. What, you're going to do that without us? How dare you go out and have a good time? How dare you go out and have a great vacation? How dare you have people into the house that aren't family for holidays? That was given up. And if that's for your health and your well-being, then you do that. Enjoy the company of people who are make you happy, who are comfortable and safe to be with. Yes, I do reinforce disentangling those two things very clearly.
I think that's so important. I think a sense of family loyalty can sometimes get in the way of our recovery process, and we feel like we're betraying the family by thinking about this. But that's why, in the settings in which we function, like with Peak, it's a confidential setting, and so it's not. I agree. We don't want to, bring this issue out into social media in a way that is harmful. But I think in appropriate settings for us to talk about. Otherwise, we're giving up on ourselves.
Yeah.
And so we can't give up on ourselves. We have to, as I've already said now several times, I think it's important for us to give ourselves permission not to give up on ourselves.
And that's not giving up hope. That's preparing.
That's not giving up hope at all. Right.
Nope. So I'm going to keep moving quickly. My daughter's estranged from me for almost a year now, refuses to do therapy work through anything, doesn't respond to texts or talk to me, and doesn't want a relationship, yet comes to my home and acts as if nothing is different. It hurts me and feels worse than not seeing her. Yeah, it does. It's kind of like dangling the carrot in front of the horse. That is just torture. And I we're not in therapy, but I would really be curious to ask why. Why do you hang out? Why do you come around? What's your purpose if you don't want this relationship? And, you know, in any way that you can, uh, with this daughter, if you have to put boundaries up in order to be healthy, again, you need to put boundaries up. And we can, I could go on about how to do that. Well, that would be another webinar, is boundaries. We certainly could do that. But that's the short answer for that. How do you handle on and off again type of relationship when the estranged child is in control of the entire process? Again, that's boundaries. Go where you're going to go, make your appointments, live your life. If if they call and they want to see you for something and you've got plans to go somewhere, you've got plans to go somewhere. You've got plans to go somewhere. Take that control back in that way. Boundaries is the best way to take that control back. Question, Bowen family.
I want, Kelly, let me just add to that.
Sure.
I think we have to get past the mentality, what I call beggar mentality, which is all the conditions are set by somebody else, whether it's an adult child or anyone else in a relationship with us. All the conditions are set by them, and we just have to acquiesce to those because we're so desperate of the relationship and so unworthy of it that we have no rights in the relationship. And that's part of why I wrote this Bill of Rights. I think in an on and off relationship, we have to think, okay, what do I require of this relationship?
Mm-hmm.
If there's going to be contact and communication, what do I communicate in that process that says, if we're going to have this communication, this is what I require? And give some thought to that, because again, you deserve, as a parent and as an adult in any relationship, there are things that you deserve as a part of that relationship, to say, this is what I need for it to be healthy for me. So think about that as well. What is it that you need in the relationship, and to be willing to communicate that as a need that is legitimate for you to ask for.
Yes. So the next question, it looks like Dana is asking me to be clear. It's Bowen Family Systems Theory. Someone who's trained in Bowen Family Systems Theory, and then they provide Bowen Family Systems Therapy. So that's what you're looking for. Thank you for your kind. Thank you for this one says, thank you both for your wisdom and insight. We thank you for your support here. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. I found myself in a paralyzed state for the last few days. It's coming into the holidays. Of course you are. Faye has written to everyone. I hope you can all see it. Email me if looking for documents like the Bill of Rights, and Faye's email address is on the chat, in the chat box. I have two. It's helpful. A webinar on boundaries is such a great idea. All right. Well, actually, you're going to see me write it down, because if I don't, I'll walk away saying, well, someone gave me a suggestion and I don't know what it is.
I want to just say something about paralyzed state. And
sure.
Kelly, you probably would have something to add to this, and I know we don't have a lot of time left. In my experience, if I'm paralyzed, it's because I'm in a lot of pain. It's like you have an injured part of your body, and why do you hold it still? Because it hurts to move it. And so often, I think paralysis comes from pain and confusion and not knowing what to do, and finding ways to surface that pain and find ways to help with it. The variety of ways we've talked about in terms of, talking to other people, exercise or sunlight. I mean, these are all ways of dealing with pain. Paralysis often says to me, somebody's in pain.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Somebody gave me a sign for my desk. It says, "Don't be like the squirrel. Make your mind and make your mind up and get across the road." And the question is, what happens to the squirrel that's paralyzed in the middle of the road? So move, make your choice, move and do what's best for you. Okay. Okay. I have liked it too. Thank you so much. Helpful. Much appreciate your feedback. Thank you, all of you, for your feedback. A webinar on boundaries is a good idea. Where is the Bill of Rights? I would like a copy. That they had mentioned that is on the website. Thank you for the excellent.
I don't think that is, but email me and I'll get it.
Okay. Email Faye for that. Thank you for this excellent webinar. I've heard and learned lots of new information. Many blessings to everyone here. Oh, blessings to all of you as well. I think we're all afraid of setting limits if we reconcile. Amy, that's a good question. We could talk about that as well in a boundaries webinar. Very end of this is a very difficult aspect that was not addressed, is how the grandchildren are alienated and used by the adult children as a tremendous loss to them as well. Yes, that is so true. Thank you, Faye and Kelly. The encouragement to take care of ourselves and set boundaries is great to hear. Your book is out of stock on Amazon. Will it be available soon? Yes, it will. And you can also go to bookbaby.com and get my book there. They print on demand. So if you order one and they don't have any, they will print it and send it to you. And then you can get it from them. So that one's bookbaby.com. And Faye, did you have something that you were going to put up on the screen at the end here?
I don't know.
I thought you were.
You mean about possible donation?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I can do that. If you would like to contribute to Peak, we don't have paid staff. You can do it through a link. It's here. Whatever you feel inclined to give will be useful to us. It pays for things like Zoom, like the website, like our email platform, all those kinds of things that are necessary to make this work. But that's totally voluntary, and we certainly don't want it ever to get in the way of your participating, which is, there's going to be another one next Sunday, right?
Yes. We'll see everybody back next Sunday, and call your friends who you think could benefit.